What is going on, guys? What is happening? Anything else Christmas related? By the way, happy Boxing Day to all of you that are watching this right now. Hope you're having a nice, relaxing day. Hope you've been having a good time with your family. And if not with your family, you've been kicking back, doing whatever it is that you enjoy. And you may notice that the camera is adjusting itself. I just got myself a little DJI Osmo mobile as a self-Christmas present. It's pretty sick, I got to admit. It's definitely taking away a lot of the shake that I used to get when I was completely handheld. Guys, this is one hell of an article. And this proves what we've been talking about all along. This proves it. This Christmas, it's likely that more people than ever before will spit into a tube or swab some cheek cells and send off the result for DNA analysis. Millions in the US have already done it, and the craze is spreading. But what happens when you find out a lot more than you were expecting? It's a great question. What does happen when that happens? 3 years ago, Jenny decided to take a DNA test just for fun. The youngest of 5 children, she'd always been intrigued by stories about her ancestors. As a teenager, she loved looking at old photographs with her grandfather, and over the decades, she had painstakingly pieced together the family tree. Once her children were grown and she had more time on her hands, Jenny, a freelance writer from Connecticut, began going to genealogical conferences and workshops to improve on her methodology. Everyone was talking about doing these DNA tests, but I wasn't keen. It all sounded very scientific, and I have no head for that. It's a very good reason why you should take DNA tests. Yet Jenny was curious to see what the test might reveal about her ethnic background, so she sent off for a kit and gave it a go. There were no surprises when the results revealed her heritage as largely British, including Scottish, with a smattering of genes from Scandinavia. Nothing exotic, she laughs. She won't be laughing soon. But a year later, she did a test with another genetic testing company and persuaded her brother to do one too. This time there was a surprise. The email with the results included a chart that she struggled to understand, but something written underneath immediately caught her eye. Estimated relationship. Half sibling. Ooh. That's something you don't want to hear. That's something you don't want to see on a DNA test you just did with your brother, is it? Jenny assumed her brother had done something wrong when he took the test. She decided that he must have left the kit lying in the sun or forgotten that you're not supposed to eat or drink an hour before providing the saliva sample. I was mad at him, says Jenny. I thought, how typical. I asked him to do one little thing and he couldn't get that right. I tried to rationalize it, but at the same time, there was the pit in my stomach. Jenny searched for answers online and learned about the centimorgan, a unit of genetic linkage. Siblings typically have 2,500 centimorgans or more in common, but Jenny only shared 1,700 with her brother. Ooh. Tormented by doubt, she asked her father's cousin, a woman in her 90s, to take the test too. She had helped me a lot with genealogy, Jenny said. We had traded photographs and she was a very sweet person. I feel terrible that I didn't tell her the real reason. I said it would be a fun thing to do and I promised I'd send her the report. 6 weeks later, Jenny was sitting in bed with her iPad when the results popped into her inbox. Unlike her brother, she shared, you guessed it, no DNA with her father's first cousin. I could just feel my heart breaking, says Jenny, her eyes filling with tears. And to be fair, this probably was a pretty upsetting and pretty shitty situation for Jenny. I thought, oh my God, it's true. My poor husband sleeping next to me had no idea what was going on. I have never felt so alone. Jenny told nobody about her findings for several months. Instead, sorry, I was fucking around with the settings here. Instead, she sent DNA kits to her remaining brother and 2 sisters and coaxed them into giving saliva samples. She had always thought she looked different from them, less tall and less dark. And the results confirmed that she was the odd one out. Jenny also talked her 86-year-old mother into taking the test. She was my mum, of course, but I wanted irrefutable proof because finding out that the man who'd raised me wasn't my dad shook me to my core, Jenny said. It just felt like everything I'd known for 50 years wasn't true anymore. A year later, she summoned up the courage to bring up the subject with her mother, who was frail and suffering from cancer. As they sat drinking tea, Jenny explained that the DNA test had thrown up some weird results. Oh, Mama's in for a ride. My mum was holding a teacup. She had it up to her mouth and was about to drink. You know, just like little, about to drink. But she stopped and looked at me, and her hands started to shake. Recalls Jenny. She was a Boston woman, a strong, proud Yankee. I don't think I ever saw her cry, so to watch her shaking like that was so hard, adds Jenny. I really agonized about asking her. I didn't want to upset her, but I also thought that I couldn't let her die and not have some questions answered because I knew I'd always regret it. Understandably. There was a business owner who lived in the same town as Jenny's family, and she remembered that he had always been very friendly with her mother. She asked if this man was her dad. I said his name, says Jenny. Her eyes got huge and she asked me how on earth I'd worked that out. Jenny's mother admitted she'd hoped to take the secret with her to the grave. You mean Jenny's mother hoped she would never have to take accountability for her actions? She had never told her husband about the affair, so the man who raised Jenny was unaware he was not her biological father, something which Jenny now finds incredibly reassuring. She describes her father, an engineer who died nearly a decade ago, as an introverted, innocent man, and she feels that he would have also been devastated to learn the truth. Understandably. It was like a new bereavement. I went through all these stages of grief, she said. It was something out of my control. There was no going back to it. Now, Michael Guevara says, in Britain, 52% of children born to married mothers are not their father's biological offspring. About 50-50 chance in the US. No info elsewhere. Studies between 2004-2008. It's probably not too far off the mark. I'll continue. Jenny found some solace in a book, The Stranger in My Genes, written by Bill Griffith, a financial journalist who had a similar experience. He hates it when I say it, but he really saved my life, Jenny says. Without his book, I think I would have gone nuts or done something destructive in my life. I contacted him and he encouraged me to write a diary about my feelings, and he even read the stuff I sent him, which was very kind. Bill, the co-anchor of CNBC's nightly business report, said his life was turned upside down in 2012 after a DNA test. He learned that his Y chromosome didn't match his brother's and that his biological father had died 13 years earlier. I never met my father, he tells me over lunch at his home in New Jersey. I never shook his hand, never hugged him, never heard the sound of his voice, never saw him walk, never heard him laugh. Like Jenny, Bill was fascinated by his family tree and had discovered that one of his ancestors was executed during the Salem witch trials of 1692. Researching his roots was something of an obsession, and for years he had visited graveyards, cathedrals, libraries, and courthouses all over the country to gather more information. When Bill learned that he was not related to the man he'd known as his father, that he was not, in fact, part of the Griffith clan, he felt an overwhelming sense of loss. It was all a big lie, and I was so angry, and I was so sad all at the same time, says Bill. How ironic that I'm the unofficial historian of our family. I've spent years learning about all of these people, and it was taken away from me, just like that. Like Jenny, Bill also faced the unenviable task of confronting an elderly mother about her infidelity decades earlier. The last thing we would believe about my sainted mother was that she had strayed, he says. And guys, this is This is the theory. It doesn't matter how good someone seems. It doesn't matter how well behaved or virtuous they seem. If an alpha male comes along and provides bred a breeding stock, it's gonna happen at some point. It's gonna happen. You know what's gonna happen. I don't even need to say it. She was a devout Christian. She was a teetotaler, didn't drink. She was the classic church lady. Bill's mother was 95 when they had this awkward conversation, and she reluctantly admitted she, and I quote, made a mistake by having a brief fling with a former boss. I say even, back in the 60s, 70s, women were having flings with their bosses. And look, of course, there would have been guys sleeping with girls at work and cheating on their wives as well. This is why I've come to realize that monogamy is not part of human nature. It's genuinely something that's basically been structured by someone who had an idea to protect the kids in a family so they can have stability. Right? And at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. Stability. You know, this is why marriage exists. This is why monogamy exists. But that's not biologically hardwired into us, guys. It's not biologically hardwired into us dudes. It's not biologically hardwired into women either, right? And we live in a society where it's like, okay, well, if you want the benefits of a monogamous relationship, you're going to have to give up your natural urges and vice versa. So, you know, look, there's pros and cons, but, you know, human nature is not designed to be monogamous for an entire lifetime, especially when breeding stock and alpha males and you know, more fertile females come into play. Like at the time she was probably quite a fertile looking female, and the former boss was probably, you know, more of an alpha male, and that's why, because as Nobba says, we are animals at the end of the day. And this is a red pill that I want you guys to take away from this. You know, you don't, just because you're married to someone, you don't automatically get their loyalty, right? You need to be the most attractive, most alpha male in their life in order to retain that position as the primary male, as the one that they lust for when they're ovulating, right? Here we go. Bill's mother was 95 when they had the awkward conversation, and she reluctantly admitted she made a mistake by having a brief fling with a former boss. I didn't want this to define our relationship in her final years. Unfortunately, I think it did though, he says. There was a sort of coolness between us after that. I think she was mightily hoping that she could slip out the back door at the end of her life without this having ever been exposed. Stories like Bill's and Jenny's are far from unique across the country. Do-it-yourself genetic testing kits are dragging skeletons out of the closets in their hundreds, if not thousands. Catherine St. Clair, a county official from Conroe, Texas, was given a DNA test for her 55th birthday by her older siblings. She too found out her biological father was a man she had never met, but unlike Bill and Jenny, her mother was no longer alive, so there was no way of getting answers to her questions. Sad. She was distraught and was struggling to accept the test results until she spoke to another woman in the same situation and decided to set up a self-help group. A year and a half later, so that's only 18 months later, Catherine's group has almost 4,100 members. It's called DNA NPE Friends. The last bit stands for Not Parent Expected. Some members were the product of secret affairs. In some cases, their mothers were raped. Others were never told that they'd been adopted as babies or small children. I'm invited to one of the group's meetings at a Mexican restaurant in Waco, Texas. A dozen people sit around a table at the back of the room eating tacos and having intense conversations. Most have driven hours to get here, pouring rain from all across the state. Catherine encourages the shyer members to speak, makes the odd joke, hands out tissues, and tells tearful women not to think of themselves as anyone's dirty little secret. Right? I met Betty Jo Bernardi, an online sales director with long dark hair who is accompanied by her husband, Angelo. 2.5 years ago, she took a DNA test which showed that her brother was only a half-brother. Like Jenny, she then got her father's first cousin tested and found out that she shared no DNA with him. So she phoned her mother in Minnesota and gently told her the results. Betty Jo's mother immediately said the testing company, Family Tree DNA, must have made a mistake. Flanked by Betty Jo's half-brother and sister angrily accusing her of lying, Her half-brother said Betty Jo needed to spend some time on a couch because she was mentally unbalanced. So that reference of spending some time on a couch means spending some time on a psychologist's couch, talking about her issues. While her sister wrote a Facebook post saying the DNA tests were untrustworthy and that only the FBI could provide accurate genetic data. Only the FBI, huh? Betty Jo wanted to be absolutely sure that her dad could not be the man who raised her, so she went one step further. Although he had died 3 years earlier, she had some of his hair and she sent it to a lab to do a paternity test. The analysis came back saying they shared 0% DNA. Let's have a look at Betty Jo and her dad, right? Tell me how much DNA, just at a glance, you think they probably shared. You see what I'm saying, guys? This was never a genetic match, unless her mother was like super dark. At this point, her half-sister said what she was doing was, and I quote, evil. And in a family group text message, this is savage. This is so brutal. Betty Jo was told, you no longer exist to us. Why? Because she's exposed her mother as cheating on her father? Because she exposed her mother about having children with more than one different man? Is that why she no longer exists to them? Is that why she's evil? Well, if that's why she's evil, I'd rather know the truth and be an evil motherfucker to my family. Fortunately, the genetics are very strong in my family. I look identical to my dad. And I look like some of my uncles as well. And, there's just too many similarities, and my sister and I are just identical. And my dad never had time to stray, and he lived in a small country town. People would have known about it. So I'm not concerned, but hey, what's going on, Hammerhand? Hammerhand says when you destroy the matriarchal myth, you have nothing left to cling to. Sadly, that's true. Here we go. Since then, Betty Jo has not spoken to her half-siblings or her mother. It's sad because my mum and I had a close relationship when I was growing up, she says. She used to call me every week, and now, never. I cried every day for months. I was depressed. I had a sort of breakdown. Christmas is an especially difficult time of year, but my kids and my husband have been really supportive, and I'm much better now. Betty Jo believes her mother's pride, her Christian faith. There it is again with the Christian faith. And the image of herself as a perfect wife and mother prevent her from admitting she had a child out of wedlock. I said if she didn't want to talk about it, she could give a statement to her attorney for me to read after her death, says Betty Jo, but she didn't even bother to reply. Just cruel, if you ask me. Some of the DNA sites have linked Betty Jo to third and fourth cousins of Mexican descent. With her dark hair and eyes of olive skin, she believes that her biological father may well have come from south of the Texas border. Her mum and the father who raised her are of Northern European descent. But Betty Jo is not motivated by curiosity alone. She said it will be helpful to know her ancestry for medical reasons, which it would, to be fair. She says she suffers from a thyroid problem. Of course you struggle with losing weight, right? It's called diet, nutrition. She says she suffers from a thyroid problem and that she and her daughter share another condition that doesn't exist on her mother's side of the family. People like Jenny, Bill, Catherine, and Betty Jo, mostly in their late 40s or 50s, are all pretty much in the same boat. Their mothers got pregnant by someone who wasn't their husband, whether willingly or not. It's hard to come to terms with, but the practical consequences tend to be limited by the fact that most of the parties involved are either very elderly or dead. So what happens when a DNA kit reveals the secrets of those who are younger? Lawrence, not his real name, also contacted Catherine Sinclair, and she put him in a special category. Not for children, but like most of those in her not parent expected group, but for fathers. His daughter, who had long been keen on family history, had been pleading with him to buy a DNA test, and he had resisted, put off partly by the $99 price tag. Then one day, Daddy gave in. When Lawrence's wife heard she looked like she'd been hit by a truck, Lawrence said, looks like some guilt pangs coming in, hard and fast. She turned pale, he remembers, and had this horrible expression on her face, like when somebody is caught stealing something, or, someone's held accountable for something that they didn't want to be held accountable for, that's pretty serious and has massive negative implications for them. That night, she closed their bedroom door and confessed to a long affair with a man she had met at work. A paternity test 2 months after their daughter was born had confirmed her hunch. The little girl was not her husband's child. She had kept that secret for 15 years. So she'd been lying to her husband for 15 years. Cruel. I know I say that a lot, but that's because it's true. Numb with shock, Lawrence phoned his mother and said he was going to walk out on both his wife and daughter, but his mother stopped him. My mum said, and his mother had wise words in my personal opinion. My mum said, "Your daughter is innocent in this. She had nothing to do with it. You love her and biology doesn't change that." So luckily she talked some sense into me, says Lawrence. He still left his wife, he still left his wife, who he felt was unrepentant, but remained a father to his daughter. What a good guy. What a good guy. He's technically a cuck, but still a good guy. Lawrence says that for a long while he felt utterly alone because men in his experience are reluctant to talk about marital problems. Just one friend admitted that his wife had had affairs, but a paternity test had revealed that he was the biological father of his children. Nobody could understand that actually finding out your daughter wasn't yours is worse than finding out your wife had an affair. 100 times worse, he said. I was on an infidelity support group on Facebook when one of the women in Catherine's group reached out to me to join this NPE group, and they set up a father's section of it. Lawrence told his daughter he wouldn't prevent her from contacting her biological father. After all, he knew the man's name, address, and phone number. But to his relief, she wasn't interested. She refers to him as the sperm donor. Which, technically, if you want to get really exact about it, that's basically what he was. But, to talk about your biological father as a sperm donor, I think it's kind of cruel as well, because, how is she to know that he actually knew that he was the father? Anyway, I'll continue here. So, you got plenty of comments here. Sorry, guys, I didn't see that. But Lawrence's son, the younger child who was biologically his, blamed his sister when their parents split up. Lawrence felt this was unfair and said so. I told him it's your mother and what she did that caused the divorce, not what your sister did by being born, he says. Despite what has happened, Lawrence said he is glad he took the test. I don't have any regrets taking the DNA tests. I'm glad I found out the truth. But I tell everyone who wants to take the DNA test, be prepared for unexpected results. There could be skeletons in your closet. Some, unlike Lawrence, with the skeletons, had been left undisturbed. One woman I met at the Not Parent Expected meetup in Waco told me she would be happier if she could go back in time and unknow what had been discovered. I can understand that. I asked her why, and there was a long pause. It's okay, she said eventually. I just didn't know I was going to cry today. I didn't plan on it. I just felt like I lost so much, and I can't replace it with something good. But there can be positives to DNA tests too. Bill Griffith has visited his biological father's grave, found pictures of him, and has reached out to a niece who knew his father when she was a college student. She was happy to hear from Bill and is helping him to fill in some of the gaps in their family tree. In Texas, Catherine St. Clair is also in touch with relatives she never knew she had. Last summer, she and her half-sisters, Rayetta and Mona, met in California for a long weekend and got on like a house on fire. That's great. That's cool, Like, if I had half-siblings, I would want to know. That's what I'm saying. Betty Jo will have her fingers crossed this Christmas when lots of people get testing kits as gifts. She hopes that a closer relative on her father's side will take a DNA test, and that in time she will learn who her real father is. It took Jenny a long time to tell her husband and children about her DNA test. In the run-up to her Thanksgiving this year, she informed all of her siblings and admits she was scared silly about it. They took the news better than she expected, although one sister is still in a bit of denial and keeps questioning the results. Jenny's daughter Katie, who is in her mid-20s, understands her mother's grief. I think I would call her a daddy's girl, she says. I remember whenever it was my grandpa's birthday, she would change her profile picture on Facebook to have one of her and him together. She adds, her dad is dead. The person she thought was her dad is dead. Her mum is dead. She died last Christmas, so now she's left to deal with this huge burden on her own. Jenny knows that she has bio-siblings, i.e. biological siblings. She has no plans to contact them at the moment, but is aware that one day the phone may ring. If they work it out, okay, we'll have to deal with it. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy that this stuff's happening, and just it does show you that there are instances where your father may not be your biological father. The question is, do you really want to know? Like, do you really want to know if that's the case? And if you did know, and that was the case, what would you do with that information? That's what you got to ask yourself before you examine something like this. But if you know someone who you genuinely question the parentage, and you know the kids, and you think that perhaps there's something going on and a dude's paying child support for a kid that's not his, and you want him to be in a position where he can actually make that decision, and you also want to, I guess, be there and be their support person for them if they do find out, and worst case scenario is true, to let them know what the guy's mother that I referred to said to him. She may not be your biological daughter, but you love her, and even though she's not your biological daughter, you don't turn your back on her. And I know it's a really bitter pill to swallow, but sometimes red pills were made to taste good. And I guess that's all I got to share with you on that front, guys. But yeah, what can I say? It was semi-amusing to read, and semi heartbreaking to read. You don't know whether to laugh or cry about these things. Anyway, I think that what Pauline Hanson actually suggested at one stage as a possible election policy is mandatory DNA testing at birth. It basically just removes any doubt, any uncertainty. There's actually some countries in which it's illegal to do DNA testing because they don't want to disrupt the family unit, even if the family unit is built on a lie. That's right, as my man Hammerhand says, and if you haven't seen Hammerhand, go check him out. He's a great channel. He says, for those of you who don't know, DNA testing is inadmissible in 36 states to prove your parentage. That's correct. That's correct. But if you got dudes that are going around cream pieing other guys' wives, that's not cool either. I don't agree with that. Especially if they know that there is a risk that they might possibly give that woman a child and that another man would have to raise that. So, anyway, guys, I'm out of here for now. I really appreciate you all. If you want to donate to Sydney for Christmas, paypal.me/SydneyMGTOW. I've had a couple of donations the last few days, and I really appreciate it. One came with a topic request, and I am going to cover that tomorrow. But I hope you all had a great Christmas. Hope you all stayed safe. Hope you're all looking after yourself, and hope any of you who are maybe struggling to find some purpose can realize that this is a long game. This is not today and tomorrow and that's it. So don't just throw things away because they're not working for you right this second. Man, I appreciate you all. I'm looking forward to catching up with you again tomorrow. And as I said, if you know anyone that needs a DNA test, could be a good birthday gift. All right, man, I'm out of here for now. I appreciate you all so much. Until next time, peace.